Hi, everybody. This is Steve Bonneman here to bring you a discussion of what's different about Online Quiz League versus other quiz formats you've played before. First, I'm going to give you a very basic rundown of the format. This format is played in teams of 4. Each player is asked a question in turn, and they can either answer that question for 2 points or pass to their team for 1. If they miss or their team misses, then the question goes over to the other team, who can score 1 point on a steal or bounce back or turnover or whatever you want to call it. So each player gets asked a question like that 8 times. We go through this sequentially. The 64 questions are asked, and then the game is scored. So that's the basic format that everyone will be playing. I really recommend watching our sample game that was played a couple of weeks ago. That will be linked in the description. But there are some things that are very specific to this league that don't just have to do with the format, and I want to talk about that a little bit now. And the first of these is hand signals. If you watch that sample game, you will see people holding up, as soon as the question is asked, 3 fingers or a fist or 1 finger or 2, depending on how confident they feel in their answer. Now, even if you're not the player being asked the question, the reason you want to do this is so that your teammate can see how confident you are in the answer. Because if they have a guess, but you definitely know it, it might be worth it for them to pass so that you can get the 1 point. So put that fist up if you're sure, but make sure that you're rating. I think a 3 might be, I think I might know this. A 1 is like, I at least have something to guess, right? You can tell what your teammates are doing. If one of your teammates puts the fist up, you may just go, all right, they're good. The reason partially that you do the fist or the fingers, even if you're on the opposing team, is because of the second distinctive thing, and that's the captain. During each game, each team has a captain. It's one of the 4 players playing. It doesn't matter very much if everybody's just answering their questions and getting them right, but as soon as a question gets passed, it technically is the captain's job to designate the player who will answer. So they're going to look at all their teammates, they're going to see who's got the most fingers up or whether they've got a fist up and say, okay, you go for it, Steve. You seem like you know this one. They can also, just if they know it themselves, answer right then. The same thing happens when questions go over to the other team because they're missed. The captain is the person who has the authority to designate who's going to do it. When you signed up a team, you put someone in the slot called captain. That person is the team captain for things like getting emails and maybe saying who's going to play each week and like making sure matches get arranged. They're the main contact for the league. But the game captain, the captain in each individual game, could be a different person every time. You just need to tell the scorer at the beginning of the game who the captain is. And really, they're just the person who might know their teammates the best, have the best sense of who might know things. And, usually someone that everybody likes. That's usually a good choice, too. The next thing we're going to talk about is seating. Every time your team is placed in the game, you need to say who's seat 1, seat 2, seat 3, and seat 4. That's the order in which they get asked questions during the rounds. It's not necessarily scientific where to put different people, but people often do it the way you might do an Olympic relay race, which is to put the strongest player maybe in the first slot and then another strong player in the 4th slot. But look, if you've got 4 players of equal ability, it may not matter that much. And if you've got 4 players of equal ability, you can just kind of make a decision on that basis. But if you definitely have a strong player that you want to anchor and answer last each round, you can do that as well and put them in the 4th spot. They'll be the last person to answer on your team each round. But you do need to declare those seats at the beginning of the game. You can't just show up and do it. That's just important for keeping track of scores. That's something you'll be asked for the first time you play a game. The next things we're going to talk about aren't about your team. They're more about how the questions work. And this is very different from anything I had ever played before when I joined the British Quizzing League. Questions are all written in pairs. There are 32 pairs of questions, and each team will hear one half of those pairs. The pairs are written in, and they're organized in several different ways. There's a lot going on here. Questions are paired pretty directly. They're supposed to be similar difficulty and on similar subjects. And Team A will hear an easy question about movies that's related to something, and Team B will hear maybe an easy question about movies that's related to the same thing or similar in some way. The questions are also divided into different subjects. Those different subjects are pretty similar to what you may have seen before in something like World Quizzing Championships. There's a lifestyle and a history and a science and a sports and games and a music and a movies and TV, that kind of thing, if that makes sense. And they're also ranked for difficulty. So there's a level 1, a level 2, a level 3, and a level 4 difficulty pair in each subject, which means 8 questions per subject in 4 different difficulties. When we put the quiz together, and this is why seeding is important, we make it so that each player receives one question from each category and 2 questions from each difficulty level. So if you get the easy sports question for your side, someone else on your team is going to get the hard sports and games question on your side. The way this works out is, and look, difficulty is obviously pretty subjective in some ways, but it's also not. You'll be able to identify as you're playing games sometimes, oh, that was the easy one, or oh, that was probably the hard one. It's not perfect. And of course, different players have different strengths. But this way, at least, players can be expected to get both easy and hard questions. So that first time you go through the first round and, you get asked something like, what action hero does Daniel Craig play? And then your teammate gets asked some really hard architecture question. They don't really have the ability to complain because their easy questions, or supposedly easy questions, are still coming. So again, that's 32 pairs of questions divided into 8 subjects and 4 difficulty levels. And then each player is given 1 from each subject and 2 from each difficulty level, because that lines up that way. So I hope that makes sense. That's why you will hear 2 questions about the same thing and go, that's odd. If you've never played British quizzing of this style before, you'd be like, that's weird, but it's actually just how the game works because it makes it as equitable as possible. It does mean that sometimes pairs, you may not feel pairs are balanced, but, very often when I've seen questions about, oh, this part of that pair was easier than that part of that pair, people disagree on which part was easier very often. So I wouldn't necessarily overestimate the importance of that. In the end, usually the better team wins, or the team that got the better stuff for them that week wins. So that's important. One final thing, there are, in addition to those kind of rigorously set pairs, there are also spare questions. Let's say that accidentally the reader reads out the answer when reading the question. This happens a lot in quizzes. You've probably experienced it before. I wouldn't say it happened. Well, a lot is a lot, but it's an experience we've all had where the reader messes up something in the question that causes it to need to be thrown out. If that happens, then a player selects 1, 2, 3, or 4, spare 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's just the number. It's random. And they will be given that spare to replace it. And they can get 2 questions if they answer it, or 1 for passing to their team and they answer it, or it can go over to the other team for 1 point. It just stands in for whatever the question they got was supposed to be. That's called a spare question, and that gets used if a question has to be thrown out for any reason. So anyway, I am very excited about this league. I'm very excited to be helping bring it to the United States. I want to give a lot of credit to the writers who are going to be writing for this format, because it is a little bit difficult. You have to make a lot of plans about where you're going to put questions and things like that. But we've put together a really good team for you, and I'm really excited for everyone to experience this league. So I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the things that are different about it. Thank you. Welcome to OQL.